Welcome, everyone, to the 30-minute Midas touch from beautiful Dyersburg, Tennessee at the Herb Welsh WrestlePlex. Now, here is pound for pound and inch for inch, the best of the best in professional wrestling today. A wrestling genius worth his weight in gold. The Golden Boy, Greg Anthony.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 30-minute Midas touch. I'm your host, the Golden Boy, Greg Anthony, and with me as always is my co-host, the Memphis Idol, Mark Tipton.
The Memphis Idol. I would certainly like to say that that title fits me, but I cannot claim that at all. I would love. I do appreciate the history and of Memphis wrestling and everything it represents, but I can't say that I've had any part in it as much as I appreciate it. I do thank you, as always, for starting us off with a bit of a laugh, because on today's episode of the 30-minute Midas Touch, we're going to discuss a subject that this is yet another subject I approach with a bit of trepidation. We have dealt with the entertainment aspects of professional wrestling before, and we're about to do it in a more general way today. It's a term that I've heard in the world of drama or theatrics, or however you want to find it, and it is the term I want to use is suspension of disbelief. It's something you see in television, movies, etc., where as a member of the audience, you accept certain things in order to enjoy the program that you're about to enjoy, the movie, what have you. In this case, this may be too long. 2019, we had the biggest movie of all time, The Avengers, broke box office records. Now, we all understand that Robert Downey Jr. does not have a suit of armor that allows him to fly and shoot repulsor rays and that sort of thing. We understand his name is not really Tony Stark. He's not a multimillionaire and all those other things that go along with it. But for the duration of that movie, we accept that is true and enjoy the movie accordingly. And that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. There are things that we know, that we accept in professional wrestling, and I want to talk about this subject, and more importantly, get your opinions from a professional's point of view about the suspension of disbelief in regards to professional wrestling.
Suspension of disbelief is obviously one of the cornerstones of our business. Real quick, let me tell you a story. A few years ago, me and Matt Riviera and a few of the other guys, we were in Las Vegas for the Cauliflower Alley reunion, and we decided to take in a show. So we went and saw Penn and Teller. And Penn said something that was very poignant. And he was talking about the world of magic, but it absolutely pertains to the world of professional wrestling as well. He said when people go to the movies or they go to a play, they go willing and able to check their suspension of disbelief at the door, and whatever world you're fixing to show them, no matter how far-fetched or out of the realm it may be, they're willing to sit there and for that time period enjoy that world, right? But when it comes to magic and when it comes to professional wrestling as well, people walk in there with a chip on their shoulder. When they walk into a magic show, it's, oh, there's a mirror there. Oh, there's a trap door there. Then when it comes to wrestling, it's, oh, he didn't really hit him with that clothesline. Those two are best friends. I saw them at the bar last week. You understand? Like, everyone walks into a professional wrestling show looking for the holes in our storytelling and in our art form. And that's kind of where, for me, that's why suspension of disbelief is so. It's not necessarily that we're trying to, have someone 100% believe from start to finish that we are, this is all really happening in front of them, but it's that knee-jerk reaction. If we can get them for a moment, you understand, or just in that match, or even things with, may not necessarily believe this one thing, but they believe the guy. You understand? Like, you look at a guy like Brock Lesnar. Why has he been on top for so many years now, and everyone griping about part-time champions and things like that? Because he is the most believable guy in the business today, period. There's no one that goes, well, I could beat his ass. You know what I mean? It's unheard of, right? Because he's the most believable. Ergo, he should be the champion. In an era of, video game connoisseurs in the locker room and guys like that, why wouldn't one of the greatest combat sports athletes of the last 30 years, why wouldn't he be on top? It makes sense, doesn't it? And that's what suspension of disbelief really is. It's about things making sense.
All right. Mentioning Brock Lesnar does speak to me loudly. I do want to appreciate you bringing him up, because when I found out he was going to participate in mixed martial arts, I was concerned. To the degree I'm concerned about Brock Lesnar, he can certainly take care of himself, but I thought, here's a guy who was known as a WWE champion at the top. I mean, I attended an event where he beat The Undertaker in a Hell in a Cell match. He was clearly poised as the top of the heap. And then I thought, if he goes into this and performs poorly, what would this say about professional wrestling in general? And so I did with trepidation. But on the other hand, he was successful. And as a result, it really led to him being the box office draw in recent years. He has clearly been the draw by the way WWE has positioned him and used him, because he was successful in it. And so his time in MMA kind of allowed for that suspension of disbelief.
Yeah, absolutely. And when Lesnar first, like you said, he was on top of the world, in WWE, and like he was going to up and leave in the middle of this amazing run. I had just started wrestling at that point. I've been wrestling a couple years, so to me it was like, man, what are you doing? I mean, that's all of our dreams, right? To be on top of the mountain like that, beat The Undertaker in Hell in a Cell, be the champion, be on main event WrestleMania and SummerSlam and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, when he left, it was like, what the hell are you doing? And of course, when he first left, what was he doing? He was leaving to go play football, right? And it turns out that, he was on the practice squad, but apparently he had maybe torn something and was injured at the time, but still almost made the NFL, like that, which is a testament to his athletic ability anyway. But then he went to the MMA stuff and became a bigger star. He solidified that, as much as Dana White and Joe Rogan and guys like that want to downplay professional wrestlers and their fighting abilities, I guess you would say, that at the end of the day, they needed a wrestler to sell them tickets. They needed a household name to put asses in the seats. And Brock Lesnar was that guy. Because of his name value from WWE, he pretty much jumped the line in UFC and ended up, getting a title shot very early and became the champion, became the face of the company. And to tell you the truth, I don't know who the UFC champion is now. Who does? I mean, because it's not as mainstream as people want to think it is. Like, oh yeah, everyone knows UFC, but name some fighters. Who's the welterweight champion right now? We don't know. I don't know. I mean, if you keep up with it, obviously, but it just, for an average fan, I think the average fan knows more about WWE than they do the average fan of UFC. Make sense?
Well, certainly. That may speak to a little bit of the UFC. We know the brand, and that may be designed because generally their careers are shorter. And for instance, Ronda Rousey's this is getting off subject. Ronda Rousey's MMA career being derailed. Let me just step away from that. But I will say Brock Lesnar, for me, had such a suspension of disbelief. And I'll just say this. By the way, the opinions expressed by the co-host of this program do not necessarily represent those of the host, so do not hold him accountable. But there are times when I watch Brock Lesnar in the ring that I am fearful for whoever has the misfortune of being in the ring with him. But that's purely my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, because like you said, you believe in everything he does, the way he walks, the way he talks and everything. He doesn't seem like someone told him to do anything, right? And that's kind of what, you're trying to create as a professional wrestler anyway. You want, whoever you are, you want people to believe what it is. Now, and this is where we've talked about this for, several episodes now, but when WWE started saying everything was phony and everything's fake and this is all, predetermined and however you want to put it, people felt like, well, you can do anything. You can be anybody. You can do this. You can do that. And it's not true. I can't walk on WWE television tomorrow and act like I'm Brock Lesnar and get that same reaction. You understand? Because I'm 5'8". I look nothing like Brock Lesnar. I am in no way, shape, or form physically comparable to him in that light. You understand? So there's no way I could get over with that. I had to find my own way to get over in professional wrestling. And that's what I did, and that's what everyone has to do. You have to find in what way, and it's everything you do. It's the way you look, it's your height, it's your weight, it's like the way you look at certain things, is certain moves that you do, it's the way you walk through the curtain, it's your music. Everything plays a part in the suspension of disbelief. And like when you create those perfect realms of it, you understand, like people will look at you and go, that's him. That's absolutely him. And then whatever you say or whatever you do, they believe by default just because they believe in the guy.
All right. I want to go a little bit. I've not heard you speak on this subject, so I'm going to risk bringing this up, but kind of the opposite side of the same coin. We saw one CM Punk attempt to pursue a career in MMA, and obviously his results were far different from those of Brock Lesnar's. Do you think that his foray into MMA in any way adversely affect professional wrestling?
Yeah, I think it adversely affected professional wrestling, but I think it more adversely affected him. You understand? Like, I don't think he ever really believed he was a tough guy. You understand? Like, I don't understand. Like, I've heard about him getting in fights over the years through wrestling, and like it was always him getting his ass kicked. Like, I never heard anyone say, "Well, Punk's a badass." You know what I mean? I'm sure the guy can handle himself. I mean, he's a grown man, but I mean, at the same time, I don't think he was, Billy Badass enough to go to the UFC with absolutely no combat fighting, training whatsoever. At least Lesnar was an NCAA champion, and he had the wrestling thing down. You understand? Like, and they just had to teach him pretty much strikes and whatever from there, right? So he had a good, strong, besides the fact that he's, 300 pounds of pure muscle and just a genetic freak to begin with. Yeah, but like Punk, it just like, it's hard to sit there and say now, well, if he ever comes back to wrestling, I think he will one day, obviously. But I mean, if he ever comes back, then I think it's going to be a lot harder for people to sell that, what they used to say, that he was like a taekwondo expert or martial arts.
It was kickboxing. What was the
Muay Thai?
Muay Thai, yes.
Yeah, he was some kind of Muay Thai fighter, and he incorporated that into his stuff like that. I mean, I think it was a hard sell then, in my opinion, but now that's even a harder sell, now that we've seen him in action. If he's so good at Muay Thai, then he should have used some Muay Thai in all those matches he lost.
All right. Well, if we could, I guess I'll try to take it to a little more generalized discussion. What I'll do is I'll just bring up what, for me, I'm speaking from the perspective of the guy in the crowd. I tried to imagine for myself, what if I stepped away from my suspension of disbelief, what would be one thing that stood out to me? Mm-hmm. Now, the one that stood out to me was something that occurs in every professional wrestling match everywhere in the world on a regular basis, and that is the idea of running the ropes. I want to let you speak about that and see what your opinion of that is, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, and that's one of those things. A lot of these new school guys are, when we start talking about psychology and things have to make sense, and you can't do this and you can't do that, and what about running the ropes? What about hitting the ropes? You can't Irish whip somebody. I said, I don't know if it was last episode or a couple of episodes, but yeah, like hell you can't. Like I said, I saw Bill Dundee do it for years. He would whip someone into the ropes because they were too green or too bad to know the difference, and he would whip them to the ropes, and sometimes they would fall on the ropes, but either way they had to bounce back. You know what I mean? And he would clean their clock every time. And in training with my students, I show them the difference between, hey, if I really want to whip you into these ropes, here it is right here. You have two choices. You can either fall into the ropes or you can turn and protect yourself and come back. And so that's kind of the psychology of it. Now, of course, that's what happens when Duck 8, you know what I mean? Like a guy just constantly hitting the ropes and stuff like that. That becomes a little more, harder to believe. There's always been psychology to everything, and everything we do is supposed to be based in reality. And some guys have, we wrestlinized it, obviously, but after a while, it's gotten so far away from the psychology of it that guys don't even know why they're doing it anymore. You understand? Like, when I got started, there was a thing we used to do where, we whipped a guy into the corner, and we would go to splash them, I guess, or something like that. But we end up crotching ourselves on the second buckle. I'm sure you've seen that 1,000 times in wrestling. And then eventually one day some guy goes, "What the hell are we going for? What is that, a crotch splash in the corner? What are we supposed to be doing with that, right?" So it all kind of just bothered us for a while until we did. And then I was watching, of all things, an episode of Sunday Night Heat. And it was Stevie Richards versus Goldust, right? And Goldust whips Stevie Richards into the corner. He goes for a monkey flip. But Stevie Richards shoves him off and he lands on his feet. Then Goldust charges again, goes for the same monkey flip, but Stevie moves and he crotches himself, right? And in that one spot, that's what it was. It was the monkey flip all along, because it's true. If you go for a monkey flip, that's where your feet would be, and you would slip, and there you go. But see, most people don't think about where did this originate? Why am I doing this? How did I get in this position? What sense does this make? All those questions seem to be out the window nowadays, and that's why I think people are buying less wrestling. Let's face it, less people are watching wrestling. Less people are, obviously because of the pandemic too, but even before that, less people were going physically to shows and buying a ticket. Less guys are making a living. It's just less. So, and I think that all has to do with our lack of suspension of disbelief.
Okay, well, if I could, your discussion brought up another example that it was hit near and dear to me, and then I want to take it a little more broad afterwards. But one of the people I admire as a fan is Daniel Bryan. I've watched him for some time. Hey, he motivated me to go to WrestleMania 30. I am a true fan. One of the things that he has done that has always bothered me is, with regularity, I will see him bounce off the turnbuckles and run to the far corner to deliver a drop kick to an opponent who's up against the far turnbuckle. The reason this bothers me is often during the same show, I will see an individual Irish whipped into the turnbuckles, and then when he hits the turnbuckles, will display great pain and fall to the mat because hitting those turnbuckles caused him pain because of the speed with which he does it. Then on the other hand, in a match later, even in some cases on the same show, I see Daniel Bryan bounce off the turnbuckle to get a running start to deliver a drop kick, as though it was hitting the ropes. Right. That has always bothered me. Is that the kind of thing that bothers you?
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. And the thing is, it all has to make sense within the same world. You know what I mean? That's whatever world we create, it has to make sense within that world. Here in Pro Wrestling Mid-South, we don't do Canadian Destroyers. We don't do any of these, brain busters off the top or anything like that, because, I don't want guys to die. You know what I mean? Like, I want to present old school professional wrestling. So in many cases, somebody's gotten pile driven in our company, and we don't see them for 6 months. You understand? Because that's the world in which we've created here. And a lot of people think, oh, it's too old school and no one believes that anymore. I completely disagree, because, in the past 2 years, I have won matches with a headlock, a regular suplex, an abdominal stretch, a sleeper. I mean, all those old school things that no one thought would work anymore, I proved that they worked. Obviously on a smaller scale, but if it works in front of this many people, it should work in front of that many people. Does that make sense? Like, and I know there's people talk about, well, there's territorial differences. You go up in the Northeast, none of this old school stuff will work. I completely disagree with that too. I mean, I think that, if you tell a story and use old school professional wrestling, like I said, create that suspension of disbelief that they believe you and what you're doing, and then I think that it works anywhere in the world.
All right. I'm on a bit of a roll here, bringing up people I admire and problems I've had with those. And so if you've listened to this podcast in the past, you have probably heard me reference The Undertaker. The Undertaker represents something that I enjoy. I have always enjoyed the theatrics. His entrance is, it is still some of the most memorable things in moments in wrestling for me are watching his entrances. They always struck me. The minute I heard that gong, I was enthralled and on the edge of my seat. However, the presentation of The Undertaker, with all the, let's say, supernatural aspects that went along with it, and if I thought about it clinical way, I would think, how did I ever allow myself to go along with this? But I did find myself saying, well, it's The Undertaker. Do you think that presentations like that of The Undertaker, or Mark Calloway, however you want to say, I refer to him as The Undertaker. That's a creation. Do you think that has an impact on this idea of suspension of disbelief?
Yeah, I mean, of course I love The Undertaker too. Okay, let's get that out of the way right now. And yeah, some of the kind of stuff I'm not as big a fan of now as I was 10, 15, 20 years ago. You understand? But like we talk about, like every rule that we talk about here on the 30-minute Midas Touch, there is an exception to the rule. You understand? And Undertaker is the exception to many, many rules within professional wrestling. There is no one else on the planet in the history of professional wrestling that I believe could have made that gimmick work. Period. He was so dedicated to it, and just he understood it from the go, I think. And so when we talk about he's an exception to a lot of these rules, yeah, I think personally, even if you took away him, surviving being buried alive, if you took away the lightning bolts and you took away all that kind of, voodoo, phenom, army of darkness kind of stuff, I think that it would still work. You understand? It would still work in any era. Does that make sense? Like, even The Undertaker in the 70s would have been, what the hell is this guy? That was the whole thing. It wasn't necessarily that, this person was actually a dead man, but it was almost like, well, this guy obviously is different from us and our normal thing, right? Same thing we talked about with the Chris Statler. I think that's her name.
Statlander.
Statlander.
The female AEW.
Yeah, the female in AEW,
Yes.
the alien, right?
Yes.
Well, of course, they come on AEW, and then Excalibur, who's in a whole nother issue with him doing commentary in a mask. But anyway, he goes on. He's like, oh, yeah, she's from this planet and that planet and da-da-da, and stuff like that. And JR goes, okay, that's enough. Because what is wrong with them going, hey, she thinks she's from this planet, she thinks she's this, she thinks she's that, and basically just putting her over like she's crazy. But instead, you try to put her over like she's really an alien, and we're supposed to believe that. That takes me out of suspension of disbelief. If she had just been another crazy chick that thought she was from another planet, well, there's a couple of those down by the subway station, I think. We can believe that, right? Because people have that kind of issue. So and that's the world we live in. You understand? So as long as it makes sense in the world you live in, then that's what it's supposed to be.
All right. Well, certainly along those lines, I'll very quickly deal with that. Like, one that came to mind as an example is there was one match that, to the best of my recollection, and correct me if I'm wrong, ended with Paul Bearer being buried in cement.
Yeah, with the Dudleys.
And even recently we saw the incident in which the Fiend Bray Wyatt was, quote unquote, set on fire in the ring by Randy Orton.
You guys can't see this because it's it's audio, but I hung my head in shame. See, this is what my problem with WWE is, and just the wrestling business in general at this point, is that, okay, let's say I concede and I tell people, okay, yes, we are a television show about wrestling now. We're not the sport that I loved, but we're a television show about wrestling. We will do television-style things, okay? With that being said, it's still the television show itself would still take place in the real world, if that makes sense. Like, it would still be a competition. It would still be titles and accomplishments and a competition between this athlete and this athlete. You understand? So, what would happen in the NFL if Tom Brady caught Patrick Mahomes on fire? You know what I mean? Like, obviously, Tom Brady would go to jail, right? And there would be, because that's the world we live in, right? So, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, even though it could be a television show if they wanted it to be. They could have all the backstage stuff and do the drama stuff and stuff like that. But why does it have to be so outlandish, right? So that's always my point. Like, they want to be this thing, but they're not. They're doing it so half-assed it doesn't make any sense. Meanwhile, no one is doing what we consider to be professional wrestling. So that's a completely untapped market that we completely have to ourselves. They're trying to bend their product to meet these mainstream guidelines so they can get more viewers and more viewers and more viewers. But what they're really doing is they're alienating both audiences, because the wrestling fans don't want to see it because it's garbage and it's not professional wrestling. And then the other people who watch television shows and things like that, they're not watching either because it's bad television. It's not. It doesn't make sense in the world that you're trying to present. So it's getting, to be vulgar, it's getting ass raped from both ends.
Okay. Well, how do I follow that? Okay.
I don't know. Well,
let me just try to move on. There are a couple of other that I guess we can move through that I would cite as examples of this. And one person you've mentioned before that we can just deal with quickly, and that is the individual known as Joey Ryan and what he is famous for.
Yeah. I mean, and that's another thing. It's like, and here's the thing, like, there's been plenty of spots where, like, a guy's wrestling in the ring and another guy grabs another guy by the junk, and the guy, you know, sells it because it hurts, obviously, anyone. That's what we talk about. Like, no one knows what a suplex feels like. No one really knows what a body slam feels like. But everyone at some point in their lives has been slapped in the face or kicked in the dick, right? So we know what that feels like. The fans know what that feels like. So when you do those things in professional wrestling matches, people react to them because, you know, inside of themselves, they know what that feels like, right? So, but what Joey Ryan did was, okay, I'm going to have this mythical whatever dong, and like they're going to grab it and they're going to sell. It's going to, I don't know, it's going to radiate through their arm and make them in immense pain. Eventually, I'm going to just do a motion with my hips. I'm going to completely flip a grown man with my penis. It is the most ridiculous thing ever. You know, just when we say this all the time, like, I don't think it can get worse, and then it gets worse. Right? And that was one of those things, like, I couldn't fathom why anyone would think that was okay, or, you know, like that's a thing. And like then it became a thing where people were paying to take pictures holding his penis, and like people were sending his, you know, Twitter stuff and stuff like that, and he loved it. He's a complete glory hound anyway, right? So he would go and, you know, he would say stuff like, you know, oh, but look at how many views I have on YouTube. Like, yeah, those views are by people who are not wrestling fans sharing it with other non-wrestling fans going, hey, look at this garbage. Or they're sharing it with their wrestling fan friends and going, hey, is this professional wrestling now?
Right. Is this what you really watch?
Yeah. Myself, I've had it sent to me several times by people I just know in the community, you know, saying, hey, is this what professional wrestling is now? Whatever happened to Ric Flair? You know? And it's like, it hurts us on so many levels, especially when, you know, we talked about this before, when you're trying to get high schools and you know, things like that to be part of the community and do this thing. And these are the kind of things that if superintendents and people that make decisions see, they're going to paint us all with the same brush and say, this is what professional wrestling is now. And they're going to give us the opportunity of fear of we're going to do something like that.
All right. Well, there's one last subject that, if you'll indulge me here, it's been a problem for me for some time now when I first saw it rear its ugly head, and that is what has come to be known as the cinematic match.
We don't have enough. We're drawing close on time, but I'll do this one. We're gonna probably do a whole episode of this, or at least mostly sometime. But yeah, the cinematic match is just what I was talking about before. It's not professional wrestling, and it's not good enough to be a movie. You understand? Like, I've got Netflix, and there's 7,000, 8,000, 10,000 movies on there that are all B-rated quality that are 10 times better than any cinematic match that I've seen, because we can't ever – you're not going to be able to do that as well as the movie industry does, so why not do professional wrestling? You understand? And that's kind of been my thing. A couple years ago at CAC, when some of this stuff started happening, people were like, it doesn't have to make sense anymore and all that kind of stuff. I said, we're a couple things away from wrestling having a laugh track. You know, and I was, you know, halfway joking. But then we have the cinematic match with Undertaker and AJ. The next night we have the one with Cena and Bray. or seen in The Fiend, and there was a laugh track on that thing. You understand? It's like it hurts my soul to see that kind of stuff, because it's like we have an opportunity to keep our business alive like we like it, intact, and the people that make decisions want to go this way, and then everyone just kind of goes along with it. You know what I mean? Where's the person going, no, I'm not going to do that? You know, even I love Edge and Orton. I think they had a marvelous match at that Backlash last year it was the greatest wrestling match ever. You know what I mean? They had a great match, but there was one shot in that thing that made absolutely no sense. Orton had Edge and his hanging DDT when he hangs the guy on the second rope and DDTs him. He had him in that ready to get that move, and all of a sudden the camera was able to shoot up from under Orton and see Edge's face. And it's like, how the hell? When they switch the camera, there's no cameraman in the ring, so there's no way to get that shot. You understand? So like that kind of stuff makes me go, oh, it's all phony. It completely breaks your suspension of disbelief. And that's what we've been talking about here. On the 30-minute Midas Touch, we've went over our allotted time. Like I said, we will never be exactly 30 minutes, but we will try to be as close as humanly possible. I am your host, the Golden Boy Greg Anthony. For my co-host, the Memphis Idol, Mark Tipton, thank you and goodbye.